Good morning, 5-star. Welcome to the 10,000 Club. I am here with your other broker support, Tracy Johnson, today.
Good morning.
Good morning. Happy fall to everybody. Love in the dark days. You can tell I have a little extra glow today because we bring in our own natural light. So if I look like I'm glowing, I am. So we're excited to be with you today. We just love this opportunity to come in and just share a little bit more wisdom, a little bit more education to get you to that 10,000 hours of education. So hopefully Doug Hale is going to join us. He's having a little technical difficulty, but we always love to see his smiling face. So hopefully he'll be joining in with us real soon. And Tracy's trying to text him and help him to get himself in here. So anyway.
He's trying. He can see us, but he can't get in. So it's
Okay.
kind of like being at the door knocking and not being able to get in. So he'll keep trying.
He'll keep trying. Good. So today we're going to talk about a topic that we get quite a bit. It's a question that we tend to get often, and we just want to help you understand the why behind the whys and the whats when you're working with the for sale by owner. We all know in this market that it could be common when we're hunting for properties off market that we might come across a for sale by owner. So we want to talk to you a little bit about how do you approach that? What do you say? What forms do you use, and why you do that? So I'm going to let Tracy start out with a few comments on, first of all, the liability. You want to go ahead and take that?
Yeah, and really too, just as a new agent, it's really hard, when number one, you're a new agent, number two, your client wants to see a FSBO and you don't really know how to approach it. And then, now we have this $295 broker transaction fee, and how do we communicate that? And it's difficult. It's difficult when you're just kind of getting your own sea legs, understanding why we have the $295 broker transaction fee. And so as an agent, it really comes down to liability is the biggest piece of it, right, Kim?
Yes.
When you enter into a transaction with another agent, their broker assumes the liability for one half of the transaction, and your broker assumes the other half. And when there is the absence of that other broker, it's almost like 5-star real estate. Greg and Paul have said yes to both sides, unwillingly, really, because the other side is unrepresented. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we collect a $295 broker transaction fee from both parties. And helping the seller understand that is about educating yourself so that you understand that exact thing. Because when 5-star says yes to entering into a transaction with someone, so we have an agent that gets an accepted offer, that's where the $295 comes into play. Because there's an accepted offer, that's when the $295 is paid at the closing. So we have a lot of responsibility from a broker, right, Kim, in terms of, the kinds of activities that are involved on the broker side, from our deal doctors, our bookkeepers, our admins. So our admins are in the background and they're working all the files. Well, now they have 2 files. Our back end broker Wolf, our bookkeepers, our accountants, they now have 2 sets of buyers and sellers. So it's really double the work. And Kim, you were talking about a broker support piece of that, of a transaction of your own, that I thought was a great example of how both sides of the transaction are actually represented, even though we don't have a seller's agency contract with that FSBO.
So often for sale by owners will reach out to us as broker support because, once again, 5-star is the only broker involved. And this is a situation that I had once early on a Saturday morning. I had a call from a for sale by owner, and they didn't understand why our agent, who had sent all the proper paperwork, which we're going to review with you, that says, I'm a buyer's agent, I don't represent you. And their question to me was, if I'm the for sale by owner and I'm paying the buyer's agent, say for instance, 3% plus a $295, they're negotiating repairs and they act like they work for the buyer.
Yeah.
And so my answer was, they do. And so I had the opportunity to explain to that seller. So one, it's really important, and we will review these forms with you, that we explain that we're not representing the seller, although they are paying us, because we're going to ask, I'm just using 3% plus 295 as an example, before we bring our buyer through the home. It took me a little bit, and this happened to be a friend of the agent. And so this for sale by owner, so they didn't understand, they were friends and they brought a buyer to their home, but why they weren't being represented. And I explained to them that they saved half of the commission by representing themselves. So for sale by owners could be just a little bit touchy, and it included my Saturday morning. I would say that morning from 9 to 12 was talking to my agent, calling the for sale by owner, calling the agent back, calling back. So it can take up a lot of time. So once again, it's 5-star that's paying on both sides of that transaction, right?
Yeah, that's an excellent example, because that is showing how taxing it is. It is using our resources. So when we think about just resources alone, we are representing both sides of that transaction. And essentially that commission was paid by the seller. He saved that money, but the liability is still borne by the person who did all the work. Because what you're going to find when you represent a for sale by owner is, when you said yes, that your buyer would work with this for sale by owner, you actually get to do double the work. And many times we're happy to do that, because we know sometimes it's that we haven't been able to find a house. So when we find this for sale by owner that says, yes, I'll work with you, we know that our client, they won. They were the winning offer. So, but at the end of the day, it's double the work.
It is. And I always am very careful to explain every time, like when I send a repair addendum, I just continue to say, I'm here to facilitate, but remember, I represent my buyer. So we can facilitate, because they don't know how to order title work typically, right? They don't have anyone reviewing their contract, and that's on them. We're there to represent our buyer, but we also need to be fair and honest and have integrity. And so, yeah, they can be really challenging. So let's talk, Tracy, about, first of all, so say, my buyer is on Zillow, and they say, and actually this happened to me last month. I had a buyer I was representing, and they sent me a home, an address. And I said, where'd you get that from? Yeah. And so they were, even though they had a portal, they love Zillow, and they were going to Zillow. Well, long story short, this home was actually listed in the Lansing brokerage, GLAR, Lansing Association of Realtors, and wasn't in our Kalamazoo one. So it wasn't showing up here, and they happened to find it on Zillow. Good for us. Yeah. Also, you know what that meant? Less competition, because Portage wasn't seeing it. So
right, exactly. Good point.
Yeah. So they found it there, and it actually was listed. But where was I going with that? Oh, and so say it was a for sale by owner and it wasn't listed. What does it look like? I know how I call up the for sale by owner, but how do you approach them, Tracy, when there's an off-market property?
Yeah, well, one of the first questions you want to ask them is, number one, is the house still available? And number two is, are you willing to work with a buyer's agent? And if they are, and sometimes it's no, and it's like, okay, well, no problem. Thank you. I have a buyer that really wanted to buy the home. And at that point, I try to educate them about buyer's agency, and that most buyers who are in the market looking for a home are working with a real estate professional. And if you saw my post the other day, it was like 90%, I think, of buyers are working with a licensed real estate professional. So when I wrote in that post about be the pro in your conversations, it's that you need to know these things, because if you happen to call a for sale by owner, you want to make sure they understand that most of the buyers running on the streets are under contract with someone. So that means that they have an obligation, a responsibility to the agent that's been opening doors and running them around on the streets. So when they show up at this door and knock on it, and the seller says, no, unfortunately, I'm not working with any buyers agents right now. Well, that means that, a huge percentage, a really high percentage of buyers are going to be unavailable to buy that house, or they have to pay the commission themselves. And many times buyers are, number one, unwilling, number two, not able, because, let's just think about a house that's priced at $250,000. They might have their 3%, 5%, 10%, or maybe 20% down, but they certainly don't have the extra money to pay the buyer's agent. So educate the seller about buyer's agency. Like, I understand right now, if you change your mind that, in the future, you'd be willing to work with a buyer's agent, let me know. So educate, ask if the house is available. Number two, are you working with a buyer's agent? If the answer is no, then that's your opportunity to educate the public about buyer's agency. And so that's sort of how my conversation starts with them.
Okay, perfect. So if they say, so if I ask that question, are you willing to work with the buyer's agent? And they say, usually they'll say, well, what does that mean? Or, explain to me more, which Tracy just did, or, well, how much is your fee?
Right.
So I explained to them on the phone at that point. So they're saying if they're going to say yes, now on the other side is I do charge 3% of the sales price plus a $295 in order to bring my pre-approved buyer through. And if we buy your home, that would be a responsibility of the seller. Are you willing to pay that?
Yep.
And you know what? Often they are, because they know, right?
Yeah.
They know what they're doing.
Right, exactly. They just knew they were trying to save 3% of the commission. And, in this market, when you have a seller's market, this is when we see more for sale by owners than we do in a buyer's market, because the sellers feel like they have the upper hand and they think they can do a good enough job. And in this case, most of the time they can, because, there aren't enough houses. The buyers present themselves with their agent, or they find it on their own. And once they get under contract, the agent grabs the transaction and pulls it all the way across the finish line.
Yep.
And again, I'm happy to, like, if it means my buyer won, I'm going to do it. I'm excited,
Yep. And I've done it several times. I just be sure that we keep the lines clear about who we're representing, but it's a lot more work. But on the other hand, we're overseeing a transaction when it's just one side of it. Anyway, we're still communicating with the listing agent. So it's a little bit more work explaining to them. And I think often my for sale by owners have appreciated that I'm willing to make sure everything is in the file, that they have title work, and that I'm communicating. And I do that in such a way that it is just simply transactional to keep them informed. So they kind of know what's next. So the next thing I would say to the seller, if the seller says, sure, I'd be willing to do that and let you come through, then there's a few forms that I would say either I'd like to explain a couple forms that I would need signed by you. I can either email them over, I can come early. I don't know what you do, Tracy. It's been a while since I've done it. Do you go in person or do you email them?
I don't usually go in person. I usually have a conversation on the phone. And then when I send the form, I give a nice explanation. Attached, please find the disclosure regarding agency relationship.
And the compensation.
Whatever. Yep. Whichever form it is.
So I don't know if you can see it because of my light, because it's so bright, but this is the compensation agreement.
It's pretty bright.
Okay, it's really bright. Let's turn that off. There we go. Is that better? So this is the compensation agreement, which you'll find in 5-star company forms. So this is the first form that we would send over, and it has the date, the property address of the seller, that we're the for sale by owner, their legal description, and then their tax ID number, right?
Yep.
And then it says here, it's very clear, before you disclose confidential information to a real estate agent regarding a real estate transaction, you should ask for a disclosure regarding agency relationship, right? This is Kalamazoo's. West Michigan Regionals looks a little more like this. Tracy probably has a different name, but they are a disclosure of real estate agency relationship, right? Yep. And then it just says your name and who are you representing? And you say buyer. And then here it's saying who's paying the commission? You would say seller if you're charging them 3%, and a $295, right? And so then you would get everybody's signature, real easy. But this is where they're agreeing to pay you before you bring your buyer through.
Right. Yeah. Like I'll give you an example. I'm doing one where I have a tenant that's living in a house. He's been living there for 10 years. And my seller is selling the house to him, but the buyer didn't have the money to pay the $295. So I had to go to the seller that says, hey, great news. You get to pay the $295 on both sides because someone has to pay the $295. So in the compensation agreement, as Kim just described, it describes, hey, who's paying what? Where is the money going to transfer? But who's going to pay what money during this transaction? Because this document will eventually go with the purchase agreement to the title company, and they are going to settle everything on a settlement statement based on that document. So it can say commission, It can dictate the 295, but it needs to be filled out. And in it, it basically says, hey, I'm going to make you do your job, because it says this is the property address. And I love that the second part says, who do you represent? Right? You need to, it tells them, hey, you should have this disclosure regarding agency relationship. And so yes, exactly. So I like it.
And then on these, we're all familiar. It's the regular disclosure regarding agency relationship, where you say, who do I represent? Buyer, seller. So in this case, it says buyer's agent. And then you have the seller sign that. So you have it twice on here. Once that they're going to pay you, you said I represent the buyer. You have it on your disclosure, I represent the buyer. That's very important, so that you're constantly or repetitively telling them, I represent a buyer, right? Even though I'm facilitating the transaction, I represent the buyer. And that's really important. And you're going to get paid, right?
Yep. Right, exactly. And then he's signing, hey, I acknowledge that up here that Kim Anderson said she was the buyer's agent. And I acknowledge that by signing, yes, check mark, I am the seller.
Yeah,
So
real simple. Clear. Yeah. And one thing to acknowledge here, to remember, is if an agent does not collect the 295 from the seller, I run into this more often with newer agents who aren't aware of our policies. If you don't collect it, accounting will take it from the buyer, from the agent.
Right.
That's just something that's standard across the board. So we totally expect you to collect it. And then the other thing you
and here's the good, can I interrupt you real quick?
Yeah.
But the good news is, if that happens to you, guess what? It will never happen again.
That's right.
You'll forget to put it on a buyer's agency contract one time. You will forget to ask a seller for it in a FSBO one time. And all the agents on my team will tell you that I always say, these are experiences that we tuck in our backpack and we truck through life and we carry. Once you put it in the backpack, you don't forget about it.
Yep. And once you forget to put it on the closing statement, like if it's on your closing file checklist and you're using Star Title and you put 295, they pick that up, right? And put it on your final closing statement. I check two things on final closing statements: commission and 295, because sometimes they do miss it. And I've not ever had a title company come back and take liability for that. So it's important to, if you're using other title companies, to make sure. Actually, I had a closing statement that came up yesterday and I was proofing it, and it's a cash. So we're using the seller's title company, and they did not have my 295, never asked me to put it on there.
Yep.
So
another great reason to use Star Title, because it's connected to 5-Star Real Estate. And so when we're using our own in-house title company, we know that every time that 295 is going to be on that closing statement. But yes, your responsibility every time is to, number one, get it into the purchase agreement, your buyer's agency contract, etc., but also to make sure that when that settlement statement comes in, it's on there.
Yep. And then lastly, you may have to provide these forms. This one is the seller disclosure. This is lead-based paint. We do want to ask the seller to fill those out. Sometimes they've grabbed them offline. Sometimes they don't know, right? Oh, and the other one is also, there's one more, the affiliated business disclosure, right? So if typically they'll say, well, we'll ask them what title company are they using. They really don't know, right? So we're going to recommend Star Title, but we like to have this affiliated business filled out so that they can't come back and say, we'd explained to them and they didn't have a choice.
Right.
So yeah. So
and that affiliated business just means we are affiliated with one another. 5-Star Real Estate and Star Title have a business relationship. Therefore, because we do, we must disclose it. But so if you just get in the habit of knowing that that form should be a part of every one of your transactions, just like the disclosure regarding agency relationship, just think that they go together.
Yep. And I still do give the wire fraud as well. I'm going to provide service. There's a difference between service and representation. I will help them through, here's the title work. You'll want to review this. I'm not reviewing it, right? For the seller. Here is, a wire fraud if you'd like to sign it, but it's a reminder stating don't transfer money. Typically a seller's not going to be, right?
Yep.
I will give them service, but my representation is always to my buyer, and you end up facilitating it. And in my experience, it typically goes really well.
Yeah. And you know what? you're providing service, but you are also showing them that you're a pro. I just remembered I did a for sale by owner probably at least 5 years ago. And again, he didn't have any of the forms. They didn't have anything, but they knew once they got a buyer that the agent would provide those things. So it's an opportunity to serve, right?
Yeah.
I'm the pro, but this guy who was the seller eventually gave me his daughter. I sold his daughter a house. So that's the thing, is that you just don't know what kind of relationship you're building. But at the end of the day, you're building a business based on relationships. So each opportunity you have to work, whether it's a buyer, a seller, or if it's a FSBO, it's an opportunity to provide a level of service that helps build a business for your future.
Yes, very good. Awesome.
Yeah.
So any other thoughts that you can think of? That I think we've covered it all. It's a great idea to make a note of these, make a little file, just to have it. So when you get in this situation, right, just so you remember and you're not looking all over for where those forms are.
Yep, exactly. 5-star company forms, there's a plethora of things there, but that's definitely where that compensation agreement comes in, and where you're going to find that. So yeah, I think you've got it. We've covered it. $295. Make sure you get it on both the buy side and the sell side. And if you have a buyer that walks through a for sale by owner, you definitely need to have a conversation with that seller about the importance of it and how he will actually be represented, even though he's paying his own commission on the sell side.
Perfect. Perfect. All right.
Beautiful.
Well, all right. So, well, we will not be here next Thursday because it's Thanksgiving. So as usual, if you have any questions, you want a one-on-one Zoom with any of our broker support team, we're always here to help you review your contracts. We won't have a live stream on Thursday, but as always, we're available for you. If you have any needs or any questions, reach out to us. So
yeah,
we didn't get to see Danielle today. Yeah, go ahead. Bud.
Yeah, no, I was going to say too, and if you missed Marissa's new Ninja crash course that she started yesterday with business planning, I believe, we had a huge success. So if you were one of the 60+ agents that said yes to it, I'm excited to see what will happen. I'm also excited to see what the actual number of people that get involved is, because I think Mary's going to be sending it out as a link to view the Zoom class at another date, but it's going on again next week. So watch your email.
Perfect. All right, everybody. Good to be with you again. Have an awesome Thursday, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Have a great day, Kim.
All right. See you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.